Mr. Kaiser, your rebuttal.
Thank you, Your Honor. Rely on the shows you've seen? Rely on the movies you've seen? That's what you were just told to do. And if that's the basis upon which the defense is suggesting you should resolve this case, then that means ignoring the law and the facts. And the facts include the fact that Corey Burton is the defendant's friend and sent Summer a text message.
Objective, this is a proper rebuttal, Your Honor. I did not go into that text message.
I understand that. Overruled, Mr. Kaiser.
I'm sorry I misspoke. It's actually a Facebook message. But when the defense says to you, doesn't believe his friend should be in trouble, first of all, that's not evidence. That's not anything you should be considering. What, if any, of the witnesses think should or should not happen to Kayle Fleischauer? But since it's been asserted, let's look at what we reviewed with Mr. Corey Burton. If I could change one thing in my life, it would be to forgive that terrible thing he, and he told you it was his father, did. And allow that peace and love to affect me and the next generation. Telling Summer Johnson Fleischauer to forgive her father for what he did. That's who spent hours and hours and hours, we've heard about it, for his friend. To help his friend to get to the desired results that he desired. To help his friend. Who said to you, well, I wasn't trying to replicate what happened that day. Well, then what was the point? He couldn't replicate what happened that day. Dr. Mills, Heather Williams showed you on the pistol, the person's hand on the pistol is going to be in the web of the pistol. The back of the pistol is going to be above the webbing of the hand. And let's just assume for the purposes of this argument, I'm not conceding it, but let's just assume for the purposes of this argument that what the defense would have you believe happened is that Chase Fleischauer's finger that has the injuries on his thumb and his pointer finger on his right hand, because he was right-handed, were consistent with the pistol flying out of his hand. Well, then it didn't go where it went in Mr. Burton's example, because it hit his finger. And the back of the webbing of the hand and the finger would have all stopped it from going. And he couldn't replicate any of that. It's not how a gun is held, and he didn't replicate it. Mr. Stalkey told you all of the problems with that thing, including the fact that in Exhibit 39, taken by Chase Durand, one of the first responders, there's a stool on the left side of that counter. There's a stool on the side of the counter that would have anything in the world to do with the hallway. So that when Mr. Stalky's there, there's the stool that went down in front of the red cup. If this thing, and it isn't, but it's important to you to understand that this is not the defense claim, the defense hypothesis is not what happened. Had it been him sitting here on this place in the stool in front of the red cup, and it had happened as Mr. Berger would have you believe it happens, it didn't. But even if it were true, if any of you buy it for any amount of time, if and when that pistol left Chase's hand, it didn't happen. But if you are thinking that it could have happened, the pistol could not have landed over there. It would have gone this way, into the kitchen, as Mr. Stalky told you. All right? From this angle of this counter into the kitchen, under the cabinets, on the floor, on the counter, where this blue and white stuff, whatever that is, was not there. Because in Exhibit 39, it was on the stool. All right? And as Mr. Stalky said, either onto the counter or onto the floor in the kitchen. Nowhere near the hallway. And just one more thing about the hallway. This is when Mr. Stalky's there mid-afternoon. This is when Detective Mikla is there with the medical examiner and a couple of other people at between 6 and 6:30 in the morning. The piece of paper is doing the job it was supposed to do. Mark where Sergeant Sather found it. Yes, it is correct to say that as a first responder, at that moment in time when he was trying to secure the house, when he's the only law enforcement officer in the house, he wasn't, quote, investigating, unquote, a crime. His first responsibility, as he told you, and as Sergeant Coleman told you, is to secure the scene, secure the firearms, keep everyone safe in the house, including the two people. And he can't control both of them at the same time. So he secured the firearm where it couldn't easily be reached, and then later put the paper down where he remembered it to be. So that was his job, and he did his job. And by having that piece of paper with the drawing on it preserve that place, that's what the mission was, and that's what was accomplished. That Chase was beaten is not anything that can be ignored. It's not consistent with the experience of Dr. McGee and Dr. Mills with 12,000 autopsies between them. Hundreds of shootings that a person at a time of an allegedly accidental shooting is beaten up. How is that? Why would that be? It would be if a person brought a pistol to a gunfight for whatever reason. And someone might say, well, why would you bring the pistol to the gunfight if you're winning? If Kayle Fleischauer is not injured an ounce. Because the winning for Kayle Fleischauer that day was not winning the fight. He was going to win the fight. He called his son a pussy. He was going to win the fight. Because Summer Johnson Fleischauer heard Chase say, I'll never hit my father. It wasn't about winning. the fight. It was about winning the argument. And the argument had started way earlier. You're a pussy. Defend your sister. Man the fuck up. Chase wasn't going to do it his way. He just wasn't. And so he went and got his gun. Not so that he would win the fight. Not so that he could, at that moment in time at least, hurt Chase any more than he already had, but to get him to say, all right, I won't be a pussy. I will fight back.
Judge,
I won't.
None of this is in evidence. This is arguing stuff that isn't in evidence.
And again, Mr. Kaiser, relate it to the facts of the case and make sure it's rebuttal. Thank you. Let's proceed.
The issue that's been presented to you was a vast scenario of what the defense posits happened at that day. And that vast scenario fails to take into account why the defendant would have gone to get the gun. Because he wanted to convince Chase to do it the way he wanted, to be the way he wanted. The defense says to you, well, you know, if you pause and hesitate, then that's a reasonable doubt. But deliberations are expected. You watch the movie. You have the general idea when you came to be a juror. So pausing and hesitating is what deliberations are about. They're about having a conversation about the thing. What the state wants, ladies and gentlemen, is justice. Just as Judge Needham will tell you. He will tell you that you are to, in fact, reach a just and fair verdict. And that's all we are asking you to do, to reach a just and fair verdict. But to understand that the fight that informed Dr. McGee and Dr. Mills's opinion is, in fact, evidence of Kayle Fleischauer's reckless state of mind in the early morning hours of that day. He talks about the most important affairs of life. Think about dealing with a person in the most important affairs of life who, when their son is shot, says, oh, fuck the police. Who, when their son is shot, says, don't talk to the police. Who, when their son is shot, says, I was up in the kitchen, oh, no, I wasn't. Who says to the police, when they ask him, do you remember what happened? He says, no, tell me what you have.
Your Honor, it's already gone over by him in his final argument.
And again, this is rebuttal. And again, Mr. Kaiser, stick it to what Mr. Gray raised in his, not a new argument. Let's proceed.
I'm addressing the question that was raised to you regarding the question of reasonable doubt. And the question of reasonable doubt that was raised to you was one of the most important affairs in life. And when you consider these facts that I have recounted so far in discussing the most important affairs of life, and how in the most important affairs of life a person who would utter these things, which are the evidence in this case, would be thought of and treated in the most important affairs of life, that's what we're talking about. A man who 3 times flashes his penis at the police and asks them if they want some.
I did not go into that.
Thank you. Mr. Kaiser, relate it to his closing, please.
These are things to consider as you consider the evidence in this case in relation to them being the most important affairs of life. In the most important affairs of life, you would consider that there is no gun on top of that refrigerator in any of the pictures that precede this. That, yes, there is a pistol on the other side of the refrigerator, which is visible on the other side of the refrigerator. You saw it. And there's egg cartons on both sides of that pistol. But where it is claimed, with no evidence, that there's a...
Your Honor, he's gone in the same routine he went in the beginning, and it's not rebuttal.
Mr. Kaiser, you have 5 minutes. Let's proceed.
I thought that it was argued that the pistol was on top of the refrigerator.
Object to that as to what he thinks, Your Honor.
Mr. Gray, be seated. Thank you. Mr. Kaiser, let's proceed.
It was claimed to you that Exhibit 322 showed these people at a football game. It does not. When the defendant, when Kayle Fleischauer didn't have his hands bagged like Chase Fleichauer did, he went into his room, he went to the bathroom, he got towels, he came out. Summer grabbed his hands, grabbed towels with his hands from the bathroom. He opened the closet door with his hands. He grabbed more towels. He brought them out with his hands. He got blood on his hands when he was laying on Chase. He held Summer with his hands. He entered the door with his hands. He tussled with the rug with his hands. He wrangled the dog with his hands. He put the dogs in the room and closed the door. He laid down and hugged Chase. He rubbed his belly. He pulled his pants up and down. He went out to the squad car in a blizzard. In the squad car, he was handcuffed. He drank water. He used the bathroom. He took the sweatpants and the pajama pants off. He took the socks off. There was snow on the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, his hands weren't bagged. So no surprise that if there had been GSR on his hands, that there wasn't any. The fact is that in this picture at whatever it was, Exhibit 5, Chase was not hurt. And that was mentioned during the defense closing. During the defense closing, Exhibit 56 was mentioned, where the defendant says, "We are fighting." Kayle Fleischauer says that's what he texted to Annette Gonzalez. When Summer woke up, the words that woke her up were, "Fuck you," and "I would never hit my father." She yelled, "Chase, it's time for bed."
Your Honor, that's misstatement of the evidence that woke her up. It didn't wake her up. The chair woke her up.
There was 2 times.
Let's proceed, Mr. Kaiser.
That's what he said. "I would never hit my father." It's speculation when she said, "I don't know that he was too drunk to work his phone or not work his phone." That's what she testified to on the witness stand. People could put the billfold on the steps anytime. It doesn't have to have been when he came up from downstairs. I want to show one frame from the video to show you what that bedroom looked like, and ask you to use your good common sense in deciding whether or not this whole thing about being out on the porch where there's no blood, about being out in the bed, whether or not they ever exchanged text messages. There's a bed. That's it. There's no blood in the bed. There's no nothing in the bed. That's it. That's the bed.
There was never any investigation of the employment.
Sustained. Mr. Kaiser, again, relate it to the facts, please.
The defense has told us here today that Dr. Dunn somehow is informing us about the circumstances of this case. And in reaching a fair and just decision in this case, ladies and gentlemen, I know that you will use your reason and your good common sense, but the underlying premise that Chase at .278, after he's been beaten and stumbling and drunk, suddenly decided to reach on top of the refrigerator for this pistol is simply not there. The pistol isn't seen. The blood-soaked sock feet are not seen. There's no blood on the refrigerator. There's no blood in front of it.
He's arguing the same stuff he did before.
Mr. Gray, Mr. Kaiser, you have 1 minute, and don't talk faster.
What Dr. Dunn said was, alcohol changes inhibitions, resulting in people doing more of what they were inclined to do anyway. Who was inclined to grab a gun? Not Chase. His friend told him they never talked about guns. They didn't have anything to do with guns. No, he never knew of Chase to be involved in guns. But who is? Who has guns? The defendant. This person, Kayle Fleischauer, he has guns. What was Chase inclined to do? Be a fun, wonderful person, athletic, who was outgoing, excited about...
Again, Your Honor, this is not...
Mr. Gray, please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chase Fleischauer's death came from this man, from this defendant. And that is why you should convict him of second-degree reckless homicide.
Thank you, counsel.